Things you should never say to your husband. Kindly subscribe to this channel so Tara can be making more videos for you. It's time to help a lover out. Regardless of how kind and caring your relationship is, there will come a time when a disagreement becomes emotional, and when emotions are charged, things can be said that aren't necessarily meant. But the problem is, once words are said, they can't be taken back, and their hurt can be palpable for some time. While it's understandable that couples argue, after all, you have two different people with different ideas, morals and ethics coming together, there are some things that just shouldn't be said. These things are often said with the intent to hurt and cause pain, which is not what you want your husband to feel. So, these are 7 things you should never say to your husband, regardless of what you're arguing about, and that he should never say to you either. We all say things in the heat of the moment, but there are certain things you should never say to your husband. Your relationship is full of love, but saying these things to your spouse could ruin your relationship. It's your fault when you're in an argument with your husband. It is easy to quickly turn to the blame game and start accusing each other of who is at fault. But this is not constructive at all and just adds to anger and frustration. In your marriage, you are a team and you work things out together. Fault is not what needs to be focused on, solutions are. Instead of arguing over whose fault things are, ask what you can do to help each other. We all say things in the heat of the moment, but there are certain things you should never say to your husband. Your relationship is full of love, but saying these things to your spouse could ruin your relationship. You're overreacting. If your husband is upset by something, or is triggered by something, telling him he is overreacting is dismissive and disrespectful. You both deserve better than that. Regardless of your thoughts on the matter, your husband is allowed to feel how he feels without you measuring whether his reaction is justified or not, and the same goes for you, by the way. Instead of saying, "You're overreacting," acknowledge how he is feeling, and ask what you can do to overcome it and move forward. We all say things in the heat of the moment, but there are certain things you should never say to your husband. Your relationship is full of love, but saying these things to your spouse could ruin your relationship. Take this mini challenge and have better conversations with your husband in 5 simple steps. Or, you never. Always and never are absolute, which means they are also incorrect. You cannot say, "You never listen to me," because it's not true. What this does is immediately put the other offside, tells them that when they do listen to you, you don't acknowledge it anyway, so why bother? This is a toxic downward spiral and one that is not conducive to a happy and healthy marriage. Instead, say something like, "I've been noticing you haven't listened to me as much lately. Is there a reason for it?" Focus on solutions, not adding to the argument. We all say things in the heat of the moment, but there are certain things you should never say to your husband. Your relationship is full of love, but saying these things to your spouse could ruin your relationship. Anything that indicates you regret your relationship, "I wish I was single, things were easier then." First of all, regardless of whether this is true or not, you probably are just remembering the highlights of your former single life and not the negatives. This tends to happen when we are feeling unhappy and want to retreat to a previous, safe time. Secondly, again, this does not help you focus on solutions in your argument. All it does is cause further dissatisfaction and anxiety. We all say things in the heat of the moment, but there are certain things you should never say to your husband. Your relationship is full of love, but saying these things to your spouse could ruin your relationship. Threats of divorce. A discussion of divorce, whether warranted or not, should never be made as a threat. "If you don't start talking to me, we might as well get a divorce." Once divorce is mentioned, the dynamic in a marriage changes and you cannot ever take it back. You go from all in, no matter what, to thinking and feeling like one person has one foot out the door and is ready to leave at any time. Even if it's said in an argument and you didn't actually mean it, the words have been spoken and they can't be taken back. We all say things in the heat of the moment, but there are certain things you should never say to your husband. Your relationship is full of love, but saying these things to your spouse could ruin your relationship. Name calling. This is the man you love and care for. Calling names is childish and belittling and does not have a place in a marriage. You are meant to support each other, build each other up and be each other's cheer squad. Name calling undermines all of this. We all say things in the heat of the moment, but there are certain things you should never say to your husband. Your relationship is full of love, but saying these things to your spouse could ruin your relationship. "I don't care, you do care," and saying, "I don't care," is another way of expressing that you are uncomfortable, scared, or worried. The problem is, saying, "I don't care," is completely dismissive, and while it may feel like it is going to help you end the argument faster, it does nothing positive for your relationship. Yes, we know we told you that you should feel free to talk about anything with your spouse, but there are some words, complaints, or sentences that should never come out of your mouth even when you're upset or angry. These harmful words cannot be unsaid and will only do damage to your marriage. It will also hurt your spouse's feelings and potentially break the foundation on which your marriage is built. Think before you speak because your words will either make or break your marriage, so remember not to say these things to your spouse. Something about regretting your marriage. When you're busy with household chores, or when your spouse fails at meeting a certain expectation of yours, you'd say, "I wish I never married you," at him. Expressing wishes of being single or regret in marrying your spouse will make him feel like a failure in this marriage. It's hurtful and counterproductive, because even in bad times you should stick to your commitment to your spouse instead of thinking about how you would feel better off without him. Something that compares your spouse and marriage to others. The grass is usually greener on the other side, so you might be tempted to compare your spouse or your marriage to other people's by saying something like, "My friend took her wife to Paris for their anniversary, that must have been nice," or, "Why can't you be more like her husband? He always helps around the house." The thing is, every marriage has its own ups and downs and there is no perfect marriage. The couple that seems like they have everything might also encounter marital problems once in a while. So, stop focusing on other people's life and work on your relationship with your spouse so that the two of you try your best to meet each other's expectations. Insults to their family or friends. No matter how annoying you think your husband's family or friends are, never throw shades or say something insulting in front of him. So, hold your tongue before you say something like, "How can you be friends with John? He's a slob," or, "I'm not going to this party family gathering, I can't stand your mother." If you have any problems with his relatives, explain the reason behind it and hopefully he would understand why you're feeling a certain way about them, and even help you solve that problem. That way, you can avoid those awkward moments like when the person overhears what you're saying or forcing your spouse to take sides. Mentioning former lovers. If the topic about exes is uncomfortable enough to discuss, imagine how hurtful it would be if you actually compare your spouse to your former lovers. Do not ever say things like, "My ex used to buy me flowers every month," or, "When I dated him, he would do this stuff for me," because it's simply upsetting and unkind. Concentrate on your current relationship and leave your former lovers out of the equation. Instead of throwing comparisons, be constructive and say, "It would be great if you could help me with this stuff." Belittling their hobbies or career. Married couples should respect their spouse unconditionally, and saying offensive stuff about things they're proud of, like their hobbies or career, will only make them feel emasculated. It might seem trivial to you, but your spouse's personal interest or career are a big part of his identity. So, attacking those two aspects in his life might sound like an offense to his whole individuality as well. Try to look at those things in his perspective and you might understand the love and passion behind it. Be supportive and give constructive criticism on the parts where you think he can improve. He may not be a pro in the kitchen, likes to give silly ideas or sometimes forgets where he left the keys, but you don't need to be overly critical to the point of making him feel dumb. Sentences like, "How can you fail at this? Use your brain. This is all your fault," or a simple, "That's a stupid idea," are mean and unproductive. It can also affect or lower his self-esteem. Rather than scolding him, share the knowledge or find solutions together. In some areas, he might teach you to do things he's better at for a change. The D word. Once you throw the divorce card in an argument or during a fight with your husband, you can't take it back. It will always haunt your marriage, filling it with doubts, insecurities and suspicions. This unforgettable word should not be easily mentioned even if it's just an idle threat. It shows lack of commitment and faith in preserving your marriage in the long run. So, unless it involves abuse or more serious offense, try to work through the challenges together and stick with your promise to be there in better or worse. If you're discussing something and you genuinely don't mind what the result is, saying something like, "You choose, I trust your choice," is a far more positive way to convey what you're feeling instead of saying, "I don't care." Your marriage is important. It deserves respect and care, and the words you speak to your husband are powerful. Ensure you don't say these things to your husband in an argument and show each other love and respect. 1. You're crazy. The way someone feels can never be wrong. Instead, say, "I can see how you would feel that way." That silent treatment, or in couples therapists speak stonewalling, is very dangerous to a relationship. It creates disconnection and frustration. Instead, tell your partner you need a short amount of time to cool off, and then intentionally go back to the conversation later. It's your fault. Assigning blame is useless and non-constructive. It just leads to further disconnection and anger. Instead, always also consider your contribution to the problem. Also, directly ask of your partner for what you would like him, her to do differently instead of assigning blame. Instead of saying, well, we wouldn't be late if you didn't take so long to do your hair, say, could you start doing your hair earlier? I will help out with the baby to make that possible. You always, or, you never. Criticism has been identified by researchers as one of the 4 communication habits that predict divorce. Instead of discussing all of your partner's shortcomings, again, be constructive. Simply tell him, her how you feel and what you would like him, her to do differently. Instead of saying, you never do anything around here, say, I am feeling overwhelmed and not considered. Could you please be in charge of doing the dishes every night after dinner? Just be nicer, better, or any other vague request. While making a request is better than criticism, vague and unrealistic requests can just further intensify the situation by frustrating your partner. Tell your spouse specifically what you would like, and be realistic. For example, instead of saying, pay more attention to me, say, please give me a hug. The word divorce, said in anger, during a fight. Using the D word is the ultimate way to non-constructive get out your anger and hurt your partner. It causes mistrust and uncertainty in the relationship. Instead, explain how you feel and what you would want your spouse to do differently in the future. If you are too angry to talk rationally, take a short, intentional break, but go back to the conversation later. Don't ignore it, stonewall, or give your spouse the silent treatment. Kate never complains to her husband, John helps out with carpool, or any other version of comparing your spouse to someone else. Instead, focus on your spouse's contribution and openly appreciate him, her for what she does right. If there is room for improvement, without mentioning any comparison, simply ask your partner for what you would like him, her to do with a reasonable and specific request. This is why my mother doesn't like you, or any other form of aligning loyalties with someone else. Instead, show solidarity to your spouse when it comes to other people's criticism. If you have your own issue with your spouse's behavior, take it up with him, her by explaining your feelings and making a direct request. There is no need to gang up on him, her in order to make your point. Kindly subscribe to this channel for more videos like this.